Welcome to the Outsmart Overeating podcast. I'm your host, Leslie Hooper, and alongside me, I have the lovely Coach Steph Miramontes in the house. Steph, welcome back to the show.
I'm excited about today's episode because I don't think we've talked about it before at all, maybe ever, on other than maybe, little snippets here and there. And it's such a common problem. I don't know why we haven't talked about it yet.
Well, I want to thank our client because she's actually the individual who inspired this specific topic. But as you added, I agree. There is definitely a conversation to be had here because many women feel like they are just stuck in this body due to their family history and genetics. And while there is some truth to that, let's be honest, it's not nearly as catastrophic as many of us make it seem. So what I'm going to do here is read this email. We've kind of cleaned it up a bit, so we're not revealing all the details, but just enough to give you an idea of what she has been struggling with. And I think many of you will be able to relate. So I'll go ahead and get started. And then, Steph, I'm going to ask you to share your initial thoughts. All right, here it goes. I have a mental battle with the notion that overweight is my fate because every woman in my family succumbs to being overweight. But on reflection, for those women I saw the most of, my grandmother and my mother, once I really sat down and thought about it, so much of their weight comes down to their behavior. Case in point, my grandmother in particular is very heavy and has always explained it as being caused by health problems. I don't dismiss that, but I also know every time I saw her or see her today, she is sitting at a table eating, not meals, but just food, snacks, leftovers, etc., always. She'd come to visit my family's house with her own meal in tow and methodically unpack it and eat it at the kitchen table. I tell this story not to shame her or anything. I perfectly understand where this behavior comes from. She starved as a child, literally during World War II. But I also know it has its consequences. My mother is a bit trickier. But I was thinking about something you said on the coaching call last week about your mother. The phrase ping pong ball stuck in my memory. My mom is a music teacher and also works with special needs kids. She is constantly running from place to place and eating when she can. But again, if I think hard about moments where I've observed her, I can see her also eating a fair bit of food, not just nibbles and a diet filled with soup. Again, not judging or shaming, but it puts into stark contrast my belief that there is a hardwired genetic destiny at play here. But against all of it, there is my babysitter, who is not yet 30 and childless. She is a twig, slightly taller than me and very beautiful. I kind of dismissed her in my woe is me case study of family fate because she is young, but here's the thing. I can see her habits and they aren't the same at all. She loves good food and eats all kinds, fried, sweet, salty, processed, but never to excess, and always leaves something on her plate. She goes to hot yoga like it's religious services. She runs around Manhattan for her job. The last time I saw her, last year, she had lost even more weight than the time I'd seen her prior 4 years before. She put it down to starting ADHD meds. But I think she figured out that diet versus abundance thing. It's taken me now and to have some of the frames you've put into place to understand what's happened. And my sister, instead of inspiring a futile sort of envy, is giving me hope because why not? All right, totally relatable, but Steph, curious for your thoughts because you also grew up in somewhat of a similar dynamic. And I know this particular client is responding to you talking about your mom being a bit of a ping pong ball, meaning a busybody.
Yeah, my mom is such a busybody. It's something that I love about her. Like, she is just all over the place. But when you are a busybody like that and you struggle with food stuff, you oftentimes don't realize how much you struggle with food stuff. You are kind of all over the place. And so your brain isn't registering, I'm sitting here eating. Now, the thing that's interesting is her grandma definitely is registering she's eating. She's methodically plating. She's sitting at the table. But what this all ends up pointing to is this belief that she says is hardwired into her psyche, that once women hit a certain age in her family, being overweight is inevitable. It happens to everyone. It is a curse of the family. It is our genetic curse. It is our generational curse. It is who we are as people. And so no matter, and the way this shows up is that no matter what she does now today to help herself with her relationship with food, with overeating, it is a futile battle that is already lost once she turns, I don't know, 45 or whatever, menopausal, like that kind of thing. And so when we have that sinister belief that no matter what we do, it's not going to matter, because as you mentioned, her younger sister's still too young to be experiencing any of these problems. If that's the case, then it's really hard to show up and try if you think you're going to have any level of success and then have the rug ripped out from under you, because that is far more painful to taste the win and have it taken away than to never win in the first place. So it is a painful thing to believe about yourself. It is also completely a false belief. It's not that genetics don't matter. Of course they do. Genetics matter in a lot of ways, but they don't matter more than your behavior and your environment. They don't.
Correct. Yes. It's so interesting because I recently shared on my Instagram account a video of me asking my daughter about her relationship with food and how she remains naturally thin, although I didn't phrase it quite like that. I just wanted to highlight for my followers the difference in their inner psychology. And of course, the comments section gets flooded with people immediately saying, well, she's 23. Everybody's naturally thin at 23. And I'm like, are they though? Like, we kind of have a bit of an obesity epidemic going on with our children nowadays, but also I didn't even mention her body. The post wasn't even about her body. It was about her thoughts and how different she thinks as somebody who has never dieted in her life. And to your point, Steph, if we have this belief that the deck is stacked against us, then we are less likely to even try to find a solution, because we just resign ourselves to, oh, it's my genetics. This is the way it's always been. I'm doomed to fall into the same footsteps as my mother, my grandmother, whatever the case may be. And it's like, that belief in and of itself is catastrophic to your goal, not your genetics, but what you think is possible. Because if we think we can't, then we won't. We don't even try.
Well, what I found really, I guess, inspiring and hopeful for her is that she went about this by kind of stating the problem and then solving it herself, which our clients do so well. I love it.
Well,
We teach them
they do have a fantastic program and coaching team over here. So
yeah, they learn how to coach themselves through their shit. But as she started kind of having this conversation, she's like, this is my hardwired belief, and this and this. And as soon as women start having babies, and as soon as they, hit a certain age, and blah, blah, blah. But then I got to thinking, I watch my grandma eat all the time. And I know where it comes from. It comes from this scarcity emotional place, this I was literally starved place. And so that really just tells us that if she was literally starved previously, I bet she wasn't overweight while she was being starved. And they've proven this in experiments and studies and things like that, that if you change your environment, even if you have a lot of dieters understand what set point is, set point theory, right? You have a set point. So your body fights to be at a certain weight, and your set point can only go up. It never goes down. So if you gain a bunch of weight, your set point kind of keeps climbing the ladder until it eventually tops out at whatever it's going to be. And then it's really hard for you to continue gaining weight past that point. And it's also impossible for you to lose much weight past that point sustainably, which is what the fat acceptance and non-diet communities tend to kind of gravitate toward, is this set point theory. And there's some truth in it, particularly if you've been a yo-yo dieter and then you create new fat cells in your body. And I won't go into the biology of the only ways you can get new fat cells, but we could do a whole ass episode on set point theory if you want. But there is some truth in set point theory, but what they're missing is settling point. And so we have set point, meaning we gain and gain and gain, and then our body gets really comfortable, and it does kind of, like it's a little hard to lose in the same environment and behavior that you gained it in. But if you moved to Europe from the US and you started walking everywhere you go, or you moved to New York City and you start walking everywhere you go instead of driving cars, like living in, I don't know, rural Texas, like I do, then you're going to flip a different switch and your body is going to lose weight naturally. It's going to expend more energy. The hunger is not going to kick up to compensate because you've switched your environment, you've switched your triggers, you've switched so many things. And so what she ended up kind of solving, this is a long way to get to my point, but what she ended up solving is it's behavioral. It's a different behavior set for grandma and mom, but when we contrast it with sister, and then she's kind of somewhere floating in the middle here, trying to decide where she lands on all of this, she can notice that it is all in the behaviors. These behaviors are in stark contrast to these others.
Precisely, which is why I want all of our listeners to know that these quote unquote naturally thin people are not genetic marvels. I'm not saying that there isn't some discrepancy. Obviously, some people do have more muscle on their frame than individuals who don't. There are a lot of factors that contribute to our genetic makeup, our DNA, the body composition that we have, but that doesn't mean that we can't develop the habits and behaviors and more importantly, the thoughts of a naturally thin person. In fact, everybody here at some point had the psychology of that. And that's what I think she's starting to recognize is, oh, okay, they are overeating pretty consistently, little by little, through their little daily habits and processes, whether subconscious or not. And that's what's contributed. So much of this is really environmental and the influences. And look, even if you look at the research, kind of going back to what I mentioned about obesity in children earlier, if you have one obese parent, your child has a 50% chance of being obese. If you have two, that number goes up to 80%. Well, is that just genetic? Or maybe that's because of the family culture and the habits that the child is adopting from their parents. And you can even look at this regionally. We both live in the South. The quote unquote fattest states are down here in the South. But if you go out to California and some of these other places, you're much more likely to see a leaner, fitter, maybe demographic in Colorado and Utah, and these places that kind of have environments that create activity, opportunities for activity. So we can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater and paint this thing with a broad brush. We have to recognize that a lot of this is environmental, cultural, and whatnot, not just genetic, although that matters, but again, not as much as we say it does or think it does, or even the family dynamic that you have might influence you to believe that it does. And that's what we're inviting you to question and push back on that narrative, because how is it even helpful for you?
100%. Something I'm finding really interesting right now is the conversation around the weight loss injections and food noise and things of that nature. And I think this is such a layered conversation that I do think some people are more, predetermined to have a louder voice that drives them toward food. Is that because they have more dysregulated nervous systems? Is that because that's how they learn to self-regulate as children? Is that because there's just more food in their environment in general? And so the environmental influences are louder and more impactful? I don't know. what is causing all the food noise. Dieting sure as shit does, I'll tell you that right now. But that's where my food noise definitely came from, was just the constant, should you eat, should you not eat, da 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 da. But I have seen people have this food noise kind of be shut down and all of a sudden change their beliefs about their genetic makeup and things like that, because they're not thinking about food constantly. All of a sudden, they can make different choices. They're making better behavioral choices. Some of it is definitely placebo effect, and I'm down. Give me all the placebo pills you've got. I'll take them. But, like if I can help myself with placebo, A+. But not all of it is. And so I find it really fascinating that there are some biological elements, and I still don't think, no matter what the biological elements are, that the psychological elements don't also exist alongside it that create the behavior. And so we can only do something about one of those things. We can't change our parents. We can't get new parents. It's like sometimes I remember back in like the bodybuilding days and reading through certain forums, and I think it was Lyle McDonald that was just like, hey, what do we do about this, this, and this? And he's like, choose better parents. And it always just cracked me up. It's so true in a lot of ways. Like certain muscle groups are harder to grow on certain people, and certain areas are harder to lean out on certain people. I will be thunder thighs till the day I die. No matter how lean my body gets, we will just we're just going to pack down there, and that's okay. I have a higher accumulation of fat cells there than in other areas of my body. Like, cool. Can't do anything about that short of going under the knife, which we're not doing. So we accept with what we got going on, but that does not mean that I am predestined to be overweight. That's not what that means.
Well, I also think, how does it even, again, helpful for you to focus on the things that you can't control instead of applying that time, energy, and effort into the things that you can control?
Yeah. Spot on. That's it. What can we control? What can we do? And I understand that that can be defeating for certain people. If you have a negative mindset, you're just like, well, if I can't control this and I have to be resigned to, I don't know, in my case, thunder thighs, I guess. This was my nickname in middle school, y'all. So like, it is what it is. But if I can't do anything about it, then why bother? But that is such a defeatist mindset to get into. It is such a narrow way of looking at things, as if these parts of you that you maybe can't improve as much as you'd like to, like I am 5'1", I will never be 5'7". No matter how bad I want to reach the top shelf, me and ladders, we are friends. That's the way it's going to go. And if I sat around bitching about never being 5'7", I would never get anything off the top shelf, right? I can just do with what I have, and thinking that diminishes my life somehow makes it so that I'm not creative, I'm not resourceful, I'm not getting the results I want in a different way. And it just limits my happiness. It's such bullshit.
Right. It's such a useless path to even explore, because it does feel defeating. And when we feel defeated, obviously we are less inclined to take action. And that just perpetuates a cycle of getting stuck where you're at. Instead of looking for solutions, we do take on that victim mentality and resign ourselves to this is as good as it's going to get. And frankly, that's why most people get stuck, because they have already adopted a belief of, I can't do this, something wrong with me. And again, with where the mind goes, the body will follow. So you have to address the mind first and foremost, always and forever. You can focus on the weight loss surgery and the Ozempic, and as I said in a recent YouTube video, your detoxes and cleanses and calorie counting and all the things. But it's still, unless we look at the inner psychology piece, look at those beliefs that are holding us back, this is why people end up regaining their weight, because they haven't yet addressed the beliefs, the thoughts, and the habits that got them into this mess in the first place, which is what I love so much about our clients' emails, because she's connecting those dots. She's seeing the thoughts, the patterns that have maybe kept her stuck for many years, resigned to, this is just the way that our family, the women in our family are. This is as good as it's going to get. So just suck it up and accept it, Buttercup. And it's like, well, I mean, that's an option, but is it true? First, make sure it's even true before we resign ourselves to it. Like you just said, you're 5'1". That's a fact. That is a fact. But that we can't change our body, that we just have to accept our weight because that's what the family narrative has been. Well, I have a problem with that, because how is your body any different than anybody else's as it relates to the way you're biologically wired for weight loss if you eat less and quote unquote move more? Not to be a reductionist over here, but that's kind of the bottom line.
Yeah.
And that's where people immediately chime with, oh, well, I mean, she's young, or she has a fast metabolism, or I've had 3 kids. It's like, yeah, I get it. But 3 kids means your whole environment changes. Not necessarily your metabolism, but your habits and your daily routine and all of the demands and the emotional roller coaster that comes with that. I mean, your priorities change dramatically. So it's very easy to blame the weight gain on the babies, but like it's not just that. There's a lot of factors that contribute to this, and some of them you can control and some of them maybe you can't. But what are the ones that we can do something about? And then what's the next best step? Which one do we want to make a priority right now? So, Steph, any final thoughts?
Just that the opposite of this is also true. As far as I'm just a big eater. My family is a bunch of big eaters. Like we're Italian or something like that. Like somebody will just throw out, I'm Italian, as if that's an explanation for being a big eater or something like that. And I understand different cultures, different environments, different experiences, but it's not a universal truth that just because you're Italian, you're a weight gainer, or, just, just because your family has been big eaters means that that this is a genetic thing for you to pick up your fork more times than your body needs. Your body is communicating with you, whether you're Italian or your family is big eaters, or, just any of the kind of fun excuses that we hear. It's like, well, I'm from Wisconsin, so, as if that's an explanation for drinking and eating cheese, or, it's just like, come on, you got to start hearing these things if you want to change them.
Yeah. And I think that is, once again, the bottom line right there is you got to change from the inside out, and there's no shortcuts. As long and hard that we fight and try to do that through dieting, there is no shortcut. And until you resign yourself to the idea that most of your struggles are happening in between your ears, first and foremost, and until that gets addressed, you're likely just going to continue on this merry-go-round of getting absolutely nowhere and becoming more and more frustrated each time you make that lap. All right. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this week's episode of the Outsmart Overeating podcast. If you're interested in learning how to adopt the inner psychology and eating habits of a naturally thin person, then be sure and take the quiz in the show notes so you can get some resources and immediately routed to a YouTube video that's going to break down exactly what that means and your diet personality type to help you get started. That is it for us. Hope you all have a great week. We will see you on the next one.